to introduce into the record four things. The oath that the senators have to take of impartiality if they sit as jurors of trial on impeachment.
Without objection.
Second, a letter from 700 historians, their statement on the impeachment of President Trump.
Without objection.
Third is the editorial from USA Today, dated, I think, December 12th, concerning impeachment of President Trump.
Without objection.
And fourth is a law review article in the Colorado Lawyer by a gentleman named Scott Parker called An Overview of Presidential Impeachment.
Without objection.
Mr. I have a very unusual report. As a former member of this, I'm asking. USA Today, I had the response to that editorial in that same paper.
You want to put it in?
Did I put that in as well?
Without objection.
There you go.
I'd like to read a statement and then ask some questions of my two colleagues here. The president should be impeached. His actions were an abuse of power that jeopardized America's national security and compromised our elections. No one is above the law, and that includes the president. By withholding almost $400 million, Ukraine desperately needed to defend itself against Russia until Ukraine did the president's political bidding. The president committed high crimes and misdemeanors for which he should be impeached under Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, and Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution of the United States of America. This abuse of power is compounded by the president's refusal to cooperate with Congress's impeachment investigation and his stonewalling of witnesses from testifying or turning over documents to Congress. Almost 14,000 people have been killed since Russia invaded Ukraine. Withholding $400 million that Congress appropriated to help Ukraine defend itself, unless Ukraine helped the president dig up dirt on his political rival Joe Biden, was the last straw for me. People's lives and our national security were placed at risk. This was more than hush money for strippers or profiting from foreign governments, staying at resort properties, or even obstructing justice, as laid out in the Mueller report. The founders fought and died for freedom and independence from a tyrannical ruler and a foreign government. Impeachment and removal from office was the remedy they included in the Constitution to act as a check on a president who placed himself above the law, abused his power for his own personal benefit, and invited foreign governments to get involved in our domestic affairs, especially our elections. A president who flaunts the separation of powers and checks and balances in our Constitution and who refuses to allow witnesses to appear before Congress would receive our founders' universal condemnation. Treating taxpayer money as his own to extort a, quote, favor from a foreign government to aid him in his re-election goes to the very heart of concerns raised by our nation's founders when they drafted and advocated for impeachment to act as a check on the awesome powers of the chief executive. For instance, Madison said in Federalist 47, quote, the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. He went on to say during the Constitutional Convention, quote, the executive will have great opportunities of abusing his power. And further, that a president, quote, might betray his trust to foreign powers. George Washington's farewell address warned of foreign influence and corruption, which leads to the, quote, policy and will, close quote, of America being subjected to the policy and will of another. Alexander Hamilton wrote in Federalist 65 that impeachment, quote, proceeds from the misconduct of public men, from the abuse or violation of a public trust. Following in that, the USA Today editorial board stated it perfectly when they wrote in their December 12, 2019 editorial, quote, "In his thuggish effort to trade American arms for foreign dirt on former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter, Trump resembles not so much Clinton as he does Richard Nixon, another corrupt president who tried to cheat his way to re-election. This isn't party politics as usual," they go on to say. "It is precisely the misconduct the framers had in mind when they wrote impeachment into the Constitution." Close quote. Impeachment is the remedy the founders placed in the Constitution to remove a president during his or her term of office. This is especially true when the misconduct involves an upcoming election. The president invited foreign participation in our election at least 3 times. First with, quote, "Russia, if you're listening," close quote. Second, with his demands on Ukraine to, quote, "do us a favor," close quote. And third, with his request for China to get involved in the 2020 election by starting, quote, "an investigation into the Bidens," close quote. Any further delay or simply allowing the election cycle to run its course results in the harm and abuse impeachment was designed to prevent. For the sake of the Constitution, fair elections, free of foreign interference, and our national security, President Trump should be impeached. So, obviously, and to my friends, we have very different opinions about this, and we work up here in the Rules Committee a lot of hours. We respect one another. But for me, this goes to the heart of the Constitution. And to my friend, Mr. Collins, you and I couldn't disagree more on this. And I would want to comment. My guess is that as an attorney, and I kind of come off with that country attorney kind of approach, and a number of us think of ourselves as kind of country attorneys. My first question just is sort of a general proposition to you, sir, and to you, Mr. Raskin. Do you, as an attorney, understand the terminology time is of the essence? You know what that means, Mr. Collins? What's it mean? What's it mean?
It depends on how you want to take time with this. I need to know it now for a purpose that might happen if I don't get it. That's what
Because, as you would say, the clock is ticking. Would you agree with that, Mr.
Yes.
Raskin? Well, the clock is ticking on the 2020 election. And I think we would all agree that if this impeachment were held in July or August or September, and drawn way out, that time is of the essence, that would really affect the 2020 elections. So I appreciate the gentleman's statement that, oh, this has been rushed and there just hasn't been enough time and all of that sort of stuff. But time is of the essence. And this instance began, at least what started it all, and Mr. Hastings introduced this into the record, the memo of July 25th, 2019, which generally transcribes, but not completely transcribes, the President's conversation, or parts thereof, with President Zelensky. And, you know, we were talking about it, and you used the word transcript, and Mr. Hastings said memo. I mean, it's a memorandum of a telephone conversation, and it's not a verbatim transcript. And it goes down at the bottom. The word inaudible is used to indicate portions of a conversation that the notator was unable to hear. So I'd like to ask you a question, Mr. Collins, and you too, Mr. Raskin. Just in terms of the completeness of this document, because I think that this document, even with things that are not transcribed, is a pretty damning piece of evidence against the president. And then I think Mr. Mulvaney's comments a month later saying, oh, we do this all the time and get over it, that too is damning. But the president says, I would like you, this is right after Mr. Zelensky says, "We are ready to continue to cooperate for the next step. Specifically, we are almost ready to buy more javelins from the United States for defense purposes." The president's next words are, our president, "I would like you to do us a favor though, because our country's been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike, ... Gentlemen, in your experience, what does ... mean? Mr. Raskin, I'll start with you.
What do ellipses mean?
Yes. Something's left out.
Well, yeah, so right, but we can say generally that something to be continued, but we don't know specifically what in every case, but you try to deduce it from the context.
And I assume, Mr. Collins, you would agree with that.
To a point, is what I heard, but I will say.
Was that a yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So then it goes on. I guess you have one of your wealthy people